making notes for the press conference, and it was like, who did we play last week? I mean, it seems like it was a month ago already as the season kind of jumps on top of us and we're getting into everything. Let me start by saying it's great to win. I'm really proud of this team. We went on the road Saturday to have the opportunity to go to Hattiesburg, a place where we had not won since 1982, I believe it was, and to see the kind of the adversity we went through early and some guys that had to step into some very difficult situations playing in, with Marlon Watts playing a key role and some of these young guys playing a key role for us. And we struggled early, especially on the offensive side of the ball, but to see the way that this team, the way they hung in there, nobody panicked, nobody flinched. They're just playing with a real air of confidence, and I think that's a real tribute to these players, to the leadership of this football team, and the way some of these guys are just carrying themselves. Really been impressive to me. I think Southern Miss is a very much improved team from a year ago, and watching the way they played and the energy they played with, and just talking to our players about understanding that all of a sudden when you're on top of the leaderboard, that you're going to get everybody's best shot, that everybody is going to start to change your packages, whether it's their coverages or their fronts, start adding different wrinkles in what they're doing on offense or defense. And so it gets harder and harder as you go. It doesn't stay the same. It keeps getting harder, and I think that's really obvious to our football players with what we went through this week and the type of game that Southern Miss played. I think Coach Monken has done a great job with that team, and they've really done some good things. And looking at the game itself, really proud defensively of the way our front seven played. To see what they did up front, the way they came out right from the beginning, controlled the line of scrimmage up front. I thought they did some really good things. That group of guys, when you start talking about Dora and Houston Bates and Vernon Butler and Aaron Brown, and the way a lot of those guys are playing right now, it's really been impressive to see them playing that way week in and week out. I thought we did some good things in the back end, and that we didn't give up the big play, the home run play for touchdown. But we got to clean some technique and some fundamental things up in our passing game. When you look at our schedule, we have played teams like Auburn. You start looking at North Texas, going down to UTSA, UTEP. We have played very heavily run-oriented football teams, and this team was the one that probably is the first one really spread us out and throw the ball the way that they did. And there's some things that we need to clean up. And when you look forward, having Western Kentucky, UAB, ODU, I mean, we're going to play some really heavy passing teams as we go forward. So we got to get some of those things cleaned up. But proud of the way the defense played. Offensively, we had a slow start, probably to say the least. I take a lot of responsibility for that, and you go into a game and you don't want to go out there and do something crazy early when you're trying to get settled into what they're trying to do so you can attack it. You don't want to go out there and say, wow, they've been pretty much a one-high man, three-deep team, and all of a sudden we started in man, and then the first 4 third downs we had 4 different coverages, and then they started settling into a two-deep. And I thought Cody really did a nice job of making some adjustments in the passing game with some of the changes that we made at halftime that we were going to have to go to a little bit more, because it wasn't necessarily the game plan that we brought in because of the different things that they were doing. So early, there were a lot of suggestions, a lot of ideas on the headset and what we needed to do to attack them. But I said, let's make sure we don't do anything to put our defense in bad field position. Let's not turn the ball over. Let's make sure we can punt it away until we have a chance to really sit down with everybody and kind of dig into what we're going to do. And I thought they came out in the second half and executed tremendously. It would have been easy to hang their heads, slump their shoulders. Things aren't going well, but yet everybody stayed very positive and very upbeat, and this is what we're going to do. And they went out in the second half and they executed it. So great win from an offensive standpoint to see us play in the way we did in the second half and the way we played deep up front on the defensive side of the ball. This week poses a whole new set of challenges for us, especially when you look at what Western Kentucky is as an offense. I think Coach Brom's done a great job with his football team. They've got a quarterback that I don't know where he ranks with all these numbers, but it's like video game type numbers. I mean, they're what they're putting up right now. I think they're second in the country in passing offense at 420 yards a game. I think they're fifth in total offense in the country and 550 yards a game. They're averaging 40-some points a game. They won this weekend 61-55, I think, or 65-51. I mean, they're just they are really executing at a high level right now. And it's not a lot of people would think that, you're going to put on the film and it's 4 wides and they're throwing it every down. They play a tight end every down. They'll motion, they'll shift them, they run the ball, they play action, pass it, but they are, like I said, just really operating at a very high level. I believe they have is like 18 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions at this point. They've only given up 12 tackles for a loss, which I think is top 5 in the country in the number of tackles for a loss. And I believe even as many times as they throw it, he's been sacked as some of the fewest number of times of anybody in the country. So great challenge for us on defense this week. On their defense, they're very multiple in what they do. They run pretty much every front and every coverage that you could draw up on a grease board. They do an awful lot of different things, and it creates a lot of problems and a lot of confusion. And there's going to be some challenges for us, but I know that our players are really excited about it. And we went to Hattiesburg last week. We had a great crowd. When we went out there, that red, white, and blue down there in the corner on the opposite end from where we came out, but they made a lot of noise. I mean, there was even a couple times that I wear a double headset kind of to try and keep the noise out, but I could even hear our crowd through the double headsets and the noise they were making. They were awesome, which really creates some excitement for us to come home. But when we talked about going to Conference USA a couple years ago, this was part of the advantages, was our fan base having the opportunity to travel. To come see us play, whether that was at North Texas or Rice or Southern Miss in some of these games. And so really looking forward to come home this week. There's no place like home, and to have a chance to come home and play for our homecoming game against a really good opponent, I think it's going to be exciting. There'll be a lot of fireworks on the field, so excited for the game this weekend.
Coach, this is really the second week that a team's come in with a different defensive scheme than y'all have expected. Is that something you probably are going to see for the rest of the way?
You have to be prepared for it, and that's why you can't come in and just say, okay, we're going to start slinging it all over the place and we're running very low-risk plays early to really get a beat on what we're trying to attack. Probably playing a little bit conservative early in the football game. Because our defense is playing so well right now. It's kind of a microcosm of what we've talked about this season. We really need our defense to kind of carry us a little bit early so we can really get a beat on what they're doing as we're trying to attack it as an offense. And I think our defense is playing really well. And so it's something that you go into, and I would say this one's going to change, but they do so many different things. I don't know that doing anything they do would be a change, because I think what they do, probably what's consistent for them is they are always changing. I mean, as a defense. So this week we just got to make sure that what we're doing is good against everything that they can do. We're going to have to try and probably limit some of the offense down and cut some of the things down to really make sure that we can go out and execute, especially when you look at, we're out there at Southern Miss, and I'm looking out on the field, and there's Marlon Watts, who's playing in his second college football game, and Marcus Gaines, and Carlos Henderson, who's a redshirt freshman, and I think there's probably about 3 starts in total between all 3 of those receivers that are out there. But the one positive thing is having Sterling should be back this week, and Paul Turner got a chance to get some reps last week. Hopefully he'll be at full speed. We knew he was able to play, but we really wanted to limit his reps that he got in that football game. And so hopefully we'll have both of those 2 back at full speed, and the experience that Marlon's gaining and Marcus Gaines is gaining is really going to help us down the road as well.
What was going on in the front, their front 7 or maybe their front 4 with the running game? Did they just whip y'all up front in the trenches, or why are the struggles with the running game?
Well, it was part of it. They did more moving than they had ever done. A lot of twisting, moving, stunting. They were never still. It was almost like every play. And then we had the injury to Brunson, where we moved Mitchell Bell into guard and had Jens at tackle. And I think you got some guys playing a new position, and then all the movement. Probably played a little cautious just because of that, because of all the movement and the way they played. But they did a nice job. I mean, we really didn't try and pound the ball between the tackles a lot. We tried to get the ball out on the perimeter a little bit more. And then really with some of the struggles that we were having and the way that they were trying to defend us, because the first 2 series of the game we were out there, they were in man and loading the box. And then as the game went on, they started spreading out more and more and going to 2 deep. And that's where we were able to do some of the things. And like I said, with the way Cody played, because I thought he played an excellent game. And you look at, I think it was 27 to 45, but yet I think there were about 10 drops or missed one-on-one opportunities. And we certainly can play better at wide receiver.
How's Hunter Lee doing, and do you have an update on if he could possibly come back this season and what's wrong with him?
He is going to, what all I can say, he's broken a bone. and it's going to be a couple weeks. The fortunate thing, bones do heal. So I don't know if it'll be a 4 to 5 week injury probably. We're certainly hoping that he can be back for the end of the season or possibly even postseason if we can get to that point. So, it's a hard thing to watch happen. Hunter's been such a emotional leader, spiritual leader for this football team. He's been such a big part of the energy that is created on game day. That it's hard to lose somebody like that. But I also think it was he talked to the team at halftime, and I think it was very inspirational, and I think it meant an awful lot to these guys for the type of leader that he is as a captain on this team, that he has to stand on the field and watch. I think was a big motivating factor for a lot of guys in that locker room.
It seemed like Trent Taylor really upped his game in the second half. How much do you think that inspirational talk from Hunter had to do with it?
I mean, he'd probably have to answer that more than I would, but I would think as as the most experienced player on the field, as a true sophomore, when you look out there and he's the most experienced player, you got Connor Smith, Carlos Henderson, the 2 true freshmen, and him, and all of a sudden he's the senior statesman out there as a true sophomore that's played in about 15 college football games. And I think, Trent can handle that load. Trent's a really good player, and I think with the experience that he has under his belt, he's becoming more and more of a vocal leader. But watching Hunter go down as close as those two are, being the 2 inside receivers, I'm sure it had an awful lot to do with it.
For you guys to win, do you have to survive a shootout, or do you have to kind of limit how many points they score? Just going into this game, what's your mindset on that regard?
Well, when you play a team like this, there's 2 ways to look at it. You either have to do just that, so keep the ball in front of you, make it a slower game, take some of their points off the board, try and control the ball as an offensive football team, or you got to say we're going to load up and get after it, and we're going to spread it wide open, and we're going to see if we can win a shootout. So those are really your 2 options, but I think that story will be told on Saturday.
What do you think that it says about the coaching staff? I know y'all probably don't like to pat yourself on the back, but I mean, going into these games, the adjustments are obvious that y'all are coming out and putting together solid game plans, good enough to win, obviously, especially in the second half. What do you think it says about maybe not just yourself, talk about yourself, but your coaching staff in general, whether that be Tony up in the box or any of the other offensive coaches that have helped y'all, I guess, get through these unique plans where teams throw different stuff at you?
Well, and that's where experience really comes in. When you look on defense, when you look at the experience that Manny Diaz has and the number of years that he's been a defensive coordinator, when you look at Oscar Giles and Ronnie Bradford and Blake, you look at where they've been and the experiences they've had, it's definitely a group effort. I don't think you can sit here and go, wow, all this credit goes to him. I think everybody on this staff has input in what we're doing, and halftime gives us an opportunity to all sit down. This is what they're doing. How do we want to attack it? What adjustments do we want to make? And they'll go meet with our players, and I think it speaks volumes for where they are with their experience and what they've done and the knowledge that they have in the game of football, how much they know the game of football. But more importantly than that, I think it shows what kind of teachers they are, because it's not only that you can draw them up on a grease board, but now you can go relate it to your players and they can go out and execute it and understand it. And so I think the credit is spread over an awful lot of people in that. And when I look at the experience on defense and the same on offense, you look at Tim Rattay playing 10 years in the NFL, and it's like, well, when we were here, we did it this way and we did it this. And you've got his experience. And even though he's been coaching for a short period of time, he was around the game for an awful long time as a player. And Tony Peterson has been a coordinator for 7 to 10 years in his profession, and been a coordinator in the Big Ten, and been around it and put together game plans and made adjustments. And then having a sharp mind like Joe Sloan as a young guy, and Matt Moore's experiences at Texas Tech, and I could go through, all of them. And I just think we have a very educated staff, a very hard-working staff, a very committed staff. But I think they do a phenomenal job with their relationship with our players. And the buy-in factor from our players right now is one of the big reasons that we're where we are right now, is because of the relationship that these coaches have with their players.
That said, the first quarter woes are still obvious. What can be done there? Do y'all wish that you could just maybe start playing in the second quarter and just omit the first quarter from now on, or what?
And I, as I said at the very beginning, I take a lot of that blame, for some of the slow starts with our offensive woes. I have started the games very conservatively. Let's make sure we don't do something foolish early. Let's not throw a pick. Let's not have an unblocked guy coming off the edge and lose a quarterback before we really get into what the flavor is. It's kind of like sparring. You know, it's like that you get in that 10-round, 12-round heavyweight fight. First 2 or 3 rounds, everybody's just kind of feeling each other out for what's there. And then you start to attack it one way or another. And so from that standpoint, I take some of that responsibility in what we're doing. And then it's having a young offensive football team or very inexperienced when you look at some of the young receivers we've talked about and a couple guys playing new positions on the offensive line. I don't want to go out there and go 0 to 60 on the first snap. And we're blessed to be able to do that because we have a defense that's playing the way that they are. So it's not like you're falling behind in these huge things where you're trying to figure it out. I also think we've got to constantly talk about just because you're conservative doesn't mean that you're not trying to move the ball. You know, we're not running 3 quarterback sneaks and punting the ball away. You know, we're still trying to move the ball, and I think we got to do a little bit better job of executing. And that's something that we've talked about as a staff. Some of the things that we need to do coming out of the gates.
Do you think you can keep relying on that defense to keep you in? Because, I mean, there could have been a few plays, just going back off the top of my head, could have easily maybe been 14-3 at half. Or
Right.
even 23 at half, and that obviously is a huge difference than 7-3. So I mean, I got what you're saying with the conservativeness, but is there a fine line between doing that and also trying to rely on the defense to kind of keep you in the first half?
Yeah, I think you got to go with the flow of the game and where's it going. You know, you're not going to come in and run empty and throw it the first 8 times, but if it's at the end of the game and you're down 10, you are. You know, I think you have to go with the flow of the game and how it's going, and can you stop them on defense? You know, can you move the ball on offense? And even you look at the first half, and I don't know how many drops we had in the first half that ends up being, you throw the ball out there in the flat, it's going to be a first down, punt. You drop the ball, and we had 6 outright drops. And then we ended up with 2 holding calls that put us behind the chains a little bit. So that's why I said I think some of that goes on us, but some of that goes on the players as well, and that we got to do a better job of executing early in the football game. So, I mean, I just think you have to follow the flow of the game with how you have to call a football game. I'm not a big believer in saying, okay, these are the first 30 plays of the game we're going to run because it can be 28-0 and you're running off tackle. You've got to be able to adjust when you go into a football game, and that's kind of how we've approached it going into each one so far.
How much do you think the win solidified that y'all can win with a passing game? I mean, we always talk about dating back to last year how, if teams stopped Kenneth Dixon, that
right.
You normally lost, but now teams can stop him in the run game, and Cody's playing well enough, putting up 400 a game where you can air it out and win
right.
that way.
Well, and you look at the teams, when you look at UTEP did that, Southern Miss did that, the teams that are starting to load the box on us, that we've shown that we can put up some pretty good numbers. I mean, especially we've had some pretty strong performances offensively as far as putting up some numbers this year. But I think we're getting better. We're growing on it. But it's nice to have that kind of balance. And we didn't have that last year because people would load the box and say, we're going to take away Kenneth Dixon. But we didn't throw for 400 yards. We threw for 180. And it was a long day, and all of a sudden it's nice to have a quarterback like that that's that dialed in that I don't think Cody is concerned with whether he throws for 2 yards or whether he throws for 200 yards and a half. I think he's concerned with the scoreboard, and he's been incredibly unselfish when we're asking him to hand the ball off and get it to Kenneth, but he's been also very willing to say, Coach, I went to him at halftime and said, we're going to spread this thing out and we're going to start to open it up. And we're going to do this, this, this. And he's like, let's do it. I'm ready. I've just been sitting here waiting for the nod. So I think as a quarterback, he'd like to throw it every down, but yet he's also very much a team player.
As an offensive-minded coach, how much are you looking forward to that matchup between Cody and Western Kentucky signal caller, who, like you mentioned, he's among the highest-rated passers
yes.
in the country.
Yes, and he's very accurate and he's very knowledgeable in what he does, and I think it's going to make for a great game. I think you have 2 offenses, one that is very explosive, and we have shown some signs. We've sputtered at times, but we've shown some signs that we have a chance to make some big plays, especially getting a Paul and a Sterling back with the experience some of those young guys got. So I think it's going to make for a very interesting matchup. I think it's going to be a great game. I think the people that are there are going to see a heck of a football game, but it's got all the makings to be a great college football game when you look at their explosiveness that they have on offense and what they can do.
Your special teams woes, I know you're probably tired of talking about those, but they continued this past weekend. Is it a youth thing? Is that the magic bullet of what's happening, or is players not good enough? I mean, what is it?
I mean, for us right now, I just like to see improvement. You know, I mean, I know that we have not performed from a special team standpoint, kicking the ball the way that we would like to, and I think it's where it all starts. When your kickoffs are landing on the 12-yard line, I mean, you got some work to do. I mean, as a cover team, to get down the field, you got some work to do to try and keep them in, inside the 25-yard line. And I don't know, I think we have 6 touchbacks at this point during the course of the season, which I'd certainly like to see us. I'd love to be able to kick it into the end zone. That's something I'd love to be able to do, and we just have to continue to challenge our 2 kickers that have been kicking off for us, because they've shown that they can do it. We just haven't been as consistent as I'd like to be. But I just don't see the progress that I'd like to see right now in the kicking game. With the punts, we start off, we hold them on defense, they punt us in a hole, we go 3 and out, we have a 20-yard punt, and they start on the 40-yard line and go in and it's 7-0. Well, I mean, those are things that are going to end up costing you football games. And so I'd like to think that I definitely think they have the talent. I've seen them do it. I just haven't seen us do it consistently, and that's what the challenge that we have right now and what we're working on and what we're trying to get to.
The push up front has been obvious with all these tackles for loss. What in your mind has been the biggest thing for that so far?
Dora back helps. I mean, definitely. It gives you one more guy. Having a Dora and a Houston Bates and a Vern Butler, and the way Aaron Brown is playing up front, I think those guys are playing really well right now. I think Oscar Giles done a great job with them, and they're starting to understand what we want. A year ago, we were a different mindset with our defense. We were much more of a read and react, where we were taking on the offensive lineman, eyes in the backfield, defeat a block. Where this year we are much more, you need to get your feet across the line of scrimmage, get 3 yards in the backfield, and then look for the ball. We are trying to be more disruptive in what we're doing with our defensive front now. And I think Manny's mindset and Oscar Giles' mindset is starting to permeate between that defensive line. They're really starting to understand what he wants, and they're getting better. They are really getting better and starting to get a better understanding. And as they are getting a better understanding and watching it work, they're starting to gain more and more confidence.
And do you see a carryover effect with the rest? I mean, obviously, when you get pressure up front, it opens up for the linebackers, but also gives the secondary knowing that if they're getting pressure, they only have to cover for a few seconds.
Right. But then the way offenses offset it, which is what we saw Saturday, you see a lot more screens. They're getting rid of the ball in a hurry, just throwing it underneath, throwing bubbles, spit out screens, and doing all those type of things. And that's what people do to try and offset a really good defensive front. And so then you've got to be able to say, okay, now how are we going to react to that? Because I don't know how many people are just going to sit in the pocket and try and throw the ball way down the field against some of the pressure that our defense has brought to this point.
So would you say that some of those middle of the field, that Southern Miss found some success in the middle of the field? Was that from some slants, some quick getting rid of the ball quick because of the pressure?
Yes and no, and that's why I said there's some technique things we got to clean up. There's one that comes to mind that goes right by Tony Johnson's ear, that right over the middle of the field. Those are plays those are the technique type things that we need to clean up. And some of our spacing in the middle got a little, I don't want to call it out of whack, but one guy gets he's a little bit out of his zone, or he's on the edge of his zone, and that creates the hole for the quarterback to find. And I thought they did a nice job hitting some of those, and those are some of the things that we need to clean up. As I said, this has been really the most passing we've seen as a defense on Saturday. Just pure drop back and throwing it around, and kind of like it was a Pascal a little bit. And so some things that we definitely need to clean up with all that.
When you have prolific passing teams like that, there's obviously 2 things you can do, blitz or drop back into coverage. In your opinion, what does it take to beat a team like Western Kentucky in that way? I mean, again, I'm sure there's a fine line of bringing a little bit of both, but
right.
From your point of view, what do you think works best to try to defend them?
Balance. I think when you have a senior quarterback, you can't be all of one or another. Yeah, they run the ball well enough that if you said we're just going to drop everybody out, they can still run the ball, and they can do a really good job of protecting, because they can keep that tight end in that I was talking about that they always have, so they don't have 2 short edges. So when you do load up and blitz, and you have a senior quarterback who can step up and check the play and protect himself and then throw the ball down the field. So I don't think you can be dominated in both. I think you have to be able to have some mixture with both of them.
Last question for me: who would be the obvious starter with Hunter out?
At this, I don't know. It's something that we've talked a little bit about this morning. You know, Connor Smith was the guy that went in and played that role for us. On Saturday, played about 35 snaps, really did a good job, has worked hard for it during the year. And we'll sit down and look at it. A lot of it's going to go into what personnel packages you play with everything. But Connor will be a guy that will definitely be in the mix somewhere.
First time in, what did we say, 45 years. Comments about that, and how did the players react after the video?
I will say this, I'm glad we won, because we wouldn't have been able to put them back on for another 45 years had we not won. So I'm glad we had the second half that we did. The players were fired up. I thought it was a really clean look. I thought Jonathan did a really nice job with it, and we talked about this is their blackout with Southern Miss and being a rivalry game and the number of times that we've played. We said, you know what, a game on the road, they're going to have their blackout. Let's have our whiteout. I didn't want to release it on game day. I didn't want our players walking into the locker room and being like giddy schoolgirls over white helmets in their locker. So we had a team meeting on Friday and kind of broke it to them and what we were going to do, and they were fired up. A lot of guys got dressed in front of the mirror. I think they liked them. I think they liked them. A lot of guys were in their uniform in front of the mirror, kind of how they look. I mean, but no, I thought they looked good. And from what little feedback I've got, I thought they were sharp, and a lot of positive comments from our fan base.
They got other things to worry about, but do you think we'll see them again this year?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. I mean, they're in there now. You know, now that they're in there, I don't want them to collect too much dust. So, but yeah, I think we'll see them again. But you know, I respect the traditions that are here, and I certainly don't want to change those. Nor am I looking to just kind of create all of our own. But I do think in today's day of college football and recruiting, and a lot of the young guys around the country that are watching it, having the variation to utilize your color schemes with different, you know, in different ways in your uniform has created a lot of energy for a lot of different teams, and I think it created a lot of energy for our team Saturday.